This is episode 2 of Worth Making. Welcome, everybody. This is a live conversation series about the underlying architecture of a creative life. How do we make things work so we can make the things worth making? So last time was our first episode, and we felt that if we were going to ask other people that we know and love about their lives, we needed to do it to ourselves first. So we did a little kind of mini version of each of ours, which was really interesting. I had a great time. Michelle, I wanted to ask you, was there something that stayed with you after the first episode? Some of the people listening may have heard it, they may not, they may go back and listen, but what was the thing that you took away that was most meaningful?
I think the thing that was most meaningful was the fact that even though we have known each other, all of us, for about a decade now and have had a lot of conversations and done a lot of events, and you both have spoken and done presentations, that I learned several new things about you two that I didn't know. And what struck me is that we all, every human, everybody we think we know, has layers of our lives that we don't know about and stories and pieces. And so I was so appreciative to learn some new things about you that were pretty deep and they meant a lot to me. And that's everything.
Great. Allison, what about you?
I feel like for me, during podcast one, I realized I am not good or comfortable speaking about myself, um, which is whatever, totally fine. No pressure, Raphael, who will be introducing shortly. I feel like I come off a lot shyer and more polite than I am. So get ready, everyone, for the real Allison. But I feel like the fact that the three of us have been chatting for so long, just trying to share all the good stuff, the dirty stuff, the nasty stuff of being a creative today, and having this podcast be a platform to not only do that, but then invite the people that we love
Mhm.
and are so grateful for. Again, in a world of trying to create more community, I'm just so inspired by it. And I'm so excited to go into episode 2, where again, I don't have to speak about myself, but I'm in a position where I can introduce someone who like completely formed the person that I am today. So that's my response,
Okay,
Karuna.
well, we will get to that in about 15 seconds. But
Yeah.
How about you, Karuna?
well, I have been thinking about something which I think this came up in the Q&A, which is like in the ether now, right? So
Yep.
like if you weren't there, you didn't hear it.
Yeah.
But we talked about the idea of like the birth and death of a project or a phase of your life. And what happens if instead of being afraid of something ending, you embrace from the beginning that everything has a death
Mm,
Mm.
and you approach your projects, your companies, your business, your
yeah.
work, a piece with that attitude? I think there's something very, very important there that I've been kind of like simmering with since our
Hmm.
last episode. So, um, I
Yeah.
wanted to bring that back up because I think it's lost to everyone, but the group of us that were there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it may be a theme that reemerges.
Yeah.
With
Something.
that, Allison, host away.
Oh my gosh. So I love this cadence. So this episode, I'm the one that was able to bring in someone, and Raphael, I am so excited for you to be the one that I'm bringing in. And just a quick intro. Raphael is my friend, my colleague, my mentor, my bandmate. Um, so I met Rafe I don't know if you'll believe this, Rafe, but 10 years ago
Oh,
at BBMG, I know, a long time, a decade ago, um, when I joined the brand studio that he co-founded, you celebrated 25 years last year, yeah?
2023 last month. Yes.
Oh
23.
my gosh,
Yeah.
insane. So again, we're talking to someone that started to design the world that they wanted so long um, before myself, Michelle, or Karuna did. We've always been people working at places. And yeah, just having you with us today, I knew that I needed you to meet Karuna and Michelle for the best reasons possible. And again, for everyone listening, we've chatted a little bit before, but I feel like everyone's completely in love with you, Rafe, as much as I am. So to have you here means the world to me. And I really want us to treat our time together similar to the times that you and me would break away and go sit across the street at the coffee shop drinking like THC sodas. I'm sorry, Michelle, maybe edit that out. Uh, that
No.
wasn't it wasn't a common thing. Or like going for tea and coffee and just the chats that we would have together. I feel like you could throw a dart on the wall on whatever it was, and we would just go nerd out.
Mm.
That's really the experience that I have hopes for today. And I kind of want to flip it when people go on podcasts, they'll like burn the first half talking about their past. But I feel like the purpose of this podcast is what's happening right now and like what is inspiring you right now and what's worth, all right, throwing in the title, like what's worth making time for and what is worth making creatively right now. I'm
Mm.
trying my best to be a podcaster.
Well, I'm going to jump in too and
Awesome.
say the last time that we were talking, that we all talked, we walked away from that conversation with you, Rafe, with Karuna and I, going, "Oh my God, we love him. We want to we want to have all these after conversations."
Poor
So
Rafe. It's so embarrassing, this whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
fawning over. So I'm going to shut up.
No, you're
Well,
really good. But
I'm so grateful. Thank you all for welcoming me to the conversation. And Allison, it's such a joy and privilege that you thought of me in this way. And Karuna and Michelle, it was a delight to meet. And I'm so excited to keep diving in deeper and exploring what I think is perhaps the most important question we could be asking right now, which is what does it mean to live a creative life? And I don't know that if we think about all the possible times that we could be alive, um, this one feels like where that question is as important, ripe, profound, rich as ever. Karuna, I really appreciated what you just said about um, the span of life and death of a project, or even just what that means to be a human being. One of my favorite authors is a woman named Sophie Strand. I highly recommend her Substack, and it's called Make Me Good Compost. And I absolutely love the premise, which is at a moment where so much is changing and so much will be changing beyond our capacity to control it, to have an aspiration to be in meaningful relationships, working creatively, um, in the doing and the creating and the process of it without attachment to
Mm.
outcome or results that we can't control. And her impulse to be good compost is so amazing, which is like, how might we be the most rich and nutrient full, joyous soil from which plants and flowers will bloom, and know
Mhm.
that we'll return to the next cycle of something new beyond us. So I just want to appreciate both the premise of the conversation with what's worth making and what does it mean to examine the architecture of a creative life, but also kind of allow ourselves to exhale, drop our shoulders, and welcome being good composts versus trying to build the next skyscraper or statue that's irrelevant anyway.
Yeah.
So I just really, really appreciate that. I think just to set the context, and then I'd welcome whatever questions to navigate into where your curiosity sits. But I think we are hungry for a creative life right now.
Mhm.
And we're at this precipice point where so many of the things that make us human, which are rooted in our creativity, are being transformed and almost pulled out from under us. Whether, as you were saying, Allison, about being part of agencies for many, many years, like we can just acknowledge that so much of that inside a capitalist structure is so extractive. It is extracting your time, your ideas to maximize the most profit margin, and the humanity in that is gone. Like our
Mhm.
endeavor is to try to say, well, can we be creative and create brands in ways that are aligned with our humanity and with life on Earth? But at the end of the day, like we're all complicit in a context that is very extractive of people, our attention, our ideas, our energy, our time. I mean, so much of it. And I am curious, what does it look like to move from extractive to generous? And an era that will be emerging where maybe our gifts and our creativity don't have to be commoditized from the beginning, but could be in an exchange economy, a gift economy, where we're able to have a creative life, have the rewards of a creative life without feeling at the end of the day depleted and exhausted and disappointed. Um, and I think that we are like, I don't know how many times in the history of the human story we've been at an inflection point or a precipice point like this. It may have been caves to agriculture, agriculture to industry, industry to information, and now we're on the precipice of something yet
Mhm.
even more found. And so I just want to acknowledge with gratitude what's worth making, what is the architecture of a creative life, how might we move from an extractive age to a generous age with our creativity, with our relationships, with our endeavors.
Mm, mm. I want to say I love that when you mentioned that in our other conversation, and I put that into some of the description for the talk, that we're at such an important inflection point that really, really resonated with me in the work that I feel like I've been being drawn to do, but to find like, well, why am I wanting to do this? Why am I seeing that I feel like creatives are so important? Why does it feel like everything is changing and blowing up and like needs to be redesigned? And when you said we have a point in time now that we can look ahead and redefine and redesign how we want things to go. That was huge to me.
Amen, Michelle. The inspiration for a lot of that was another author that I admire named Charles Eisenstein. And he's written, We're Living in the Space Between Stories. And I think that that's
Mm.
absolutely right. We've inherited a story that we're appreciating no longer serves us and no longer makes sense, whether that's the consumption economy, the extraction we just talked about, or many other deep myths and fantasies about who we are as a people or a society. And then the news story is just like it's this fragile set of ideas and aspirations, and it's just emerging. It doesn't quite exist. And so in this space in between, exactly as you shared, Michelle, is such a profound and beautiful time to ask, what are the systems and what are the stories that we can remake and
Mhm.
are worth making for your theme.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
Rafe, I think that's a perfect segue into what you're doing now. Like you're moving from an existing structure that you built over 23 years to maybe a fragile new project, right? So what is it and what made you decide that this is what your energy and your time should be spent on now?
Cool. Absolutely, Karuna. So, as Allison shared, 23 years into brand studio life, I am still in love and more committed than ever to the power of brand and the power of design and the power of story, to redesign the systems and retell the stories that can regenerate our world. I am all in on that. I still believe, even though the context for a purpose-driven studio or a sustainability and social impact studio is a bumpy place to be, with the cultural backlash and the political backlash and even legal risks now of being sued for doing things that help human beings, which is bonkers.
Wow.
But I still believe, and BBMG remains really a brand studio committed to where brand, sustainability, and social impact can live together elegantly and create value, whether that be for mission-driven brands or for philanthropies or nonprofits trying to understand issues in our society. At the same time, through conversations I've had with now a mentor, a coach, and a colleague named Ariana Gomez, who is a polymath who has studied eco-philosophy and the work that reconnects from Joanna Macy, warm data, grief rituals and theory. And she's really helped to illuminate for me, kind of in this space in between stories, the confluence of the climate collapse, AI transformation, the extreme wealth and income inequality, and the concentration of power and wealth among very, very few actors. And as a consequence of all of these dynamics, kind of social division and dysfunction, and these are all accelerating. And with AI, they're reinforcing each other. And as a consequence of that, as we were just saying about this precious moment, Michelle, we're about to feel the carpet that's under life as normal, whatever that may be, pulled from under us. Whether that's like our jobs will be replaced in 2 months or 4 months or whatever that Dario Amodei was saying from Anthropic in his latest piece on machines of benevolent grace, like just talking about the role that AI will play, and up to 50% of white collar jobs will be gone in the next year to 2 years. Like, that's so discombobulating, not to mention increasing climate dynamics and all the things that we all know. And as a consequence of that, Ariana asked, yes, we need, brilliant new technologies to help us navigate change. But she said, what about the humans in the story and what's happening to our own like psychological, emotional, relational resilience through what is going to be very profound change that none of us have been through before. It's like taking Industrial Revolution, the nuclear age, World War II, and putting them all together. And it's like, wow. And I fell in love with that context. And so she and BBMG, Ariana and BBMG, have just launched last week the Resilience Collective. And the premise of this is, we know a lot about technical resilience, but the story of human resilience is just emerging. And it's asking, what do we need individually? What do we need communally to build the capacity, skills, somatic calmness, like in your body, calmness to navigate what's coming. And so through this work, we are inviting two very large impulses. One is kind of personal and communal practices that allow us to navigate disruptive change. And then the other is created story, co-created and imagined new stories of a culture we can live into. And so just to share a little bit about how we're hoping to bring this forward, and you can learn more at resiliencecollective.co, is that Ariana has developed a methodology called the resilience spiral, which is for we humans who are embracing this new era. The first, and it's a spiral, so this isn't as linear as I'm about to share it, and all of these are interconnected. But the first impulse is really around radical acceptance of what is, a deep understanding of the emerging reality without trying to control it, without trying to resist it, but just appreciating what is and what's coming at us without judgment or a desire to control. And this is just, being very mindful of what we're living into. And this is broadly around, radical acceptance of what is. The second impulse is called facing change. And really that's inside of just like processing and letting go, release, and to some degree grief of what's ending. And the creative world that we were in 10 years ago doesn't exist now, and it's not going to exist in the future. That's a release and a letting go. We don't have to try to grab that back. Um, so much of the things that we enjoyed, whether it's our experiences in nature or the simple ways that we would enjoy life 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, they won't exist anymore. And so there is a moment where we're letting go and releasing the world as we know it. But that doesn't mean the world is ending. It
Right.
just means the world as we knew it is changing. But that
Yeah.
also, by design, endings also mean new beginnings.
Yeah.
And that opens up the really generative part of the resilience
Yeah.
spiral methodology, which is rooted in belonging and living through these times in relationship. Reimagining was letting go of systems that don't work, unlearning patterns and mindsets that no longer help us, and then starting to create the generative open space of what's emergent. And then the last one is becoming. And just to drop a really interesting provocation from Ariana, the idea of becoming from a creative life, she asks, what might be creativity if we are designing with the wisdom of nature, the kindness, love, and compassion of humanity, and the power of AI?
Hmm.
And so she calls that symbiotic co-creation. Some people have called this co-intelligence. So, like, I would invite, as we think about a creative life, what does it mean to design with biomimicry and the lessons and wisdom of
Yeah.
nature, our own human love and compassion, and the power of what AI can make possible?
Yeah.
So, anyway, all of this is about creating a set of practices and principles and ways of learning and discernment that allow us through to live a creative life through unimaginable change and staying human and grounded and loving and creative while the world around us will turn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will jump in. Rafe, all of that, again, to your quote, amen. I completely agree on that, especially when we're trying to be creative on behalf of someone else, right? A client or a studio, etc. And I'm going into coffee talk right now of today,
Means I can
20
have some coffee.
2026. How do humans who are not being creative for other people keep their creativity? And I know you have a daughter who's hyper creative. I'm super interested on hearing about how, whether it's a side gig or a passion project or just making sure you don't lose it. Like so
Mhm.
many, like everyone here kept it by chance, I think, throughout their life and adulthood. Like, how do we promote having a curious, creative mind in 2026?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is the core of the issues. And let me
I
share
know.
some.
I'm
I,
asking the smartest
I'm
person I know. So, yes.
so all of what I'm sharing is rooted somewhat like philosophically, but also meant to have some threads to very discrete practice.
Yeah.
And in this case, I'll also frame this with some bigger ideas, and then let's talk together about what this will mean in practice. And I have some ideas from a branding perspective, but we can talk broadly about creativity. When we started BBMG, my dad is a 93-year-old rabbi. He's an absolute joy, and he's so funny and brilliant. And so we sat down with my dad, and we were like, well, if you were to start a studio, what would be on your mind? What would you think about? And he's a rabbi. And so he said, here, he was like, boom, right away. And we literally took out the napkin. And he said, here are the 5 things that I would do. He said, number one, that whatever makes you feel most deeply creative comes to life every day. And that's different for everyone. But what he means is like creative with a capital C, connecting us to the creativity of all life in the universe. And it's really like that thing, you know it when you're in it, it's flow, it's magic. But whatever that is, that it has an opportunity to come to life in your work and in your
Mm-hmm.
endeavors,
Mm-hmm.
and so that you feel creative. And that you can be an accountant and feel creative. Like it's all of us in our creativity. The second, and this is important too, is that you're working with and alongside people who share your values. And what he meant by that is that what's ultimately important to you is important to the people you're working alongside. And I think that really, really matters, that you're in a same belief system and aspiration. The third is that you literally grow and evolve every day. And that means that you're challenging yourself, you're learning, you are being mentored, whether that's co-mentorship or with an elder or a younger, but you're in a growth environment. And that means that who you are today, you would literally not even recognize yourself 6 months ago because you just feel yourself expanding. The fourth is that ultimately that we can use our precious time and energy to try to make life better for others and the world around us that is in some way generous, and caring for the world.
Mm.
And finally, that you can make a good living, and not to diminish the fact that we just need to make sure that we're safe and we're sound and we're whole. And so feeling deeply creative, and that your creativity comes to life working with people who share your values, growing and evolving, making a difference, and making a living. And, very concisely, Professor John Rodden, who was our professor of utopian literature, and introduced me and Mitch, the other co-founder of BBMG, he said, "Are you here in class just to make a living one day, or are you here to make a life?" And that idea of not just make a living, but make a life, and it's the both and being so important. So as you asked, what does it mean in 2026 to live a creative life and to make a living as a creative? I wanted to start with some of those basic founding ideas that my dad honestly shared and gave to us, because I think they do matter. And they have been a kind of a compass for us to try to make the right decisions along the way.
Mm-hmm.
As it relates to, okay, now we're going to move toward the daily practice. And behind that will be the economics. And that's where it gets really interesting right now.
I'm ready. This is what I've been waiting for.
Yeah. Because I think all of us want to talk about that, where are we, this is the compass. And then the roadmap is the next thing, right? Like, how do we do that? But I think getting to the point of saying, first you have to have that compass so you know which direction to go, and keeps you focused. And I think having those things are really important. A great
Yeah, I will chime in that absolutely making a good living and a good life. I feel like during my time with Rafe at BBMG, we had our BFF CFO of life, Brian, who definitely helped educate all of us about finances. So I would love to hear more about that from your perspective, Raphael, because I know you two are going to be connected forever to the end of time, and I will as well. And I think that would be a really valuable piece to share with my two besties here.
Absolutely. And maybe in the show notes, we can upload Brian's the 101 on financial health presentation, because it's really great.
We should probably get Brian in the loop as well to be a
he's
guest.
a perfect guest in the future. Just talk about financial health. I want to put the finance conversation in the wholeness part, though, because it's how we feel whole. And when we feel whole, it is that we are creative and growing and working alongside people we care about and share values and aspirations with. But feeling whole is also that you feel recognized and seen and rewarded for your creativity, your time, your contribution, and that you are able to grow through that. And the wholeness is that you literally go to bed every night and wake up every morning not feeling icky about being like in a transactional relationship that isn't aligned, but rather it won't always be perfect. There's a lot of dynamics inside of like running a small business or leading an agency or dealing with clients. Of course, we navigate lots of different dynamics, but just knowing that you're there to care for each other, you have each other's back, and you're building something that we're all feeling invested in because it makes us feel like wholeness, and that's also financial. I'll talk about what Brian was about, and then we should talk explicitly about, as we try to architect the creative life, how do we do this with financial success?
Perfect.
And just to be clear, like, I am a child mind for this with you as well. Like, we're all finding our way. It is all the kind of business models and the world order that we grew up in are gone, and so we're all navigating an unknown. And I think that saying that we don't know is a healthy thing, and I don't know the answer, but I'll help discern together where we might go. Brian joined BBMG after, he's our CFO, Brian Miller, genius, lovely human. He joined BBMG after being a trader on Wall Street and saying, "Oh my God, this is bullshit," and then traveling the world teaching and learning, and then coming back and saying, "Well, how can I use my finance skills to really try to do something more generative and more supportive and generous?" And so at BBMG, we're a B Corp, we're a founding B Corp from 2007. He very much has led our efforts to design the business for all stakeholders through the B Corp certification. And he was really clear, like, how do we make sure that the business as an enterprise is not only giving us a way to feel creative and connected, but helping us feel financially well and whole? And so, like, all of our policies were about how to make sure that everyone has the salary, the benefits, the savings, and the practices to just continue to build safety, financial security. And, we're a small business. We've had ups and downs too. There have been times, where we take a pay cut together. The whole team goes to 80%, and then we make our numbers, we can go back up. Like, we've done that as a team over the, in the financial crisis of 2009. And once again, when we were all going through the COVID pandemic. So that's just part of life. But what you'll see in Brian is, really day-to-day guidance to make sure that you're able to meet your needs today, that you are building something that can help you feel more stable and secure in the future, and that you're also able to live the life you hope to live, whether that's travel or side hustles or creating a print studio like Allison has done, so. And ultimately, that is making a living and making a life, and not to be like, for 8 hours a day or more, we're going to extract your labor, give you the lowest possible salary, and try to win fucking award,
Right,
as
right.
No.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, come on. So anyway, I think please do invite Brian Miller on, and then we will share his 101 financial plan, because it just is helping, along the way. The other things that I would say is, and this is where we're all leaping into the unknown. And I have a perspective a little bit about how branding might survive as a discipline. I'd welcome your thoughts as well, as like a breadth of creative life. But I think we're definitely all experiencing, and this is going to be an exponential curve, like how significantly displaced will we be by AI agents and generative AI? And I think again, I'm willing to philosophically, die on this hill, is that I ultimately believe that creativity is intimately human. And it is from our experience, our frailties, our yearnings, our disappointments, our deep emotions. And of course, again, co-intelligence or symbiotic co-creation, absolutely, AI can play a role, an amplification, a creative role, an exponential role. But I think at the heart of it, I do believe creativity is the kind of creativity we're talking about is not just repeating other ideas or assembling other ideas, but it's moments where we have something that comes from a lived experience, that comes from emotion, that comes from a relationship. I'm sure the AI tech folks are laughing because I'm now officially a dinosaur by saying that. That said, it is a hill I'm willing to die on, which is I do believe there is a space, and it could be tiny or a vast chasm between what AI can mimic and what is a true human experience. And until we're technological, biological beings in future generations, at least in our human biological bodies, I believe creativity is something um,
We still own it.
we still
Can I,
have, yeah, a role.
Yeah.
Still about what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
I would love to jump in here, Michelle and Karuna, if you're cool with it. Um, just my research, as you know, Rafe, for the last 3+ years in the AI space, I went into it, I wouldn't say cautiously. I feel like I went into it like head on to be able to have solid opinions about it. And I completely agree with you that on the creative level, AI can pump out something that will perform. Of course, absolutely. And I would even flip, this is a biggie, everyone. I would flip the narrative to attention span and lifespan of brand. That is something that I'm noticing on the side of AI coming through. I feel like AI is almost the result of people making purchases or caring about something for a very short amount of time. This is like remove the AI side of things. Um, that's just something I've been thinking about a lot. Do I think, when we were working together at BBMG and a branding project from strategy to the handoff creative deliverable would be like 6 months. Is that timeline acceptable today? No. Everything needs to be so much faster. But I think that there's a lot of garbage marketing being pumped out. I think if I think about the world of TikTok, the crappier it looks, the more authentic it seems. That'll probably flip at some point. We're in the middle of a cycle. And again, this is me at like coffee talk right now, nerding out. But yeah.
I think part of like one thing that you're saying, I'm not sure I'm going to express this perfectly, but what I'm like hearing and feeling from what you're saying, Allison, is that it's something that I've long believed about creative minds, which is that you look for the spaces that in between, the spaces where nobody is going, the spaces where like it's turned dark and it's been forgotten. Those are generative spaces for creative people, and it's almost by definition what AI doesn't have. AI is taking everything that people are doing that's present and, working with it. And
Yeah.
so there's this really kind of yin yang dynamic with this potentially. And when you, Rafe, when you kind of introduced very high level at the beginning of this conversation, how you're looking at all of this, you talked about a relationship to nature too. So we have a physical body. We're only beginning to understand the relationship between, like the real relationship between our mind and our body, which is still I'm still saying those as separate words, right? Which is somewhat ridiculous. And we're surrounded by a physicality that AI can never experience in the way that we do. What I wonder is there actually like a really symbiotic relationship? And if it's not based in fear, but it's based in true creative inspiration, how does that change our perspective and how we engage with AI? And when we think about it as symbiotic, or we think about it as holistic, and we look at how to use it as opposed to how to fear it, what does that mean about how we approach our work tomorrow when we wake up?
I have opinions, but I will let Rafe go first.
I love what you're sharing. Here's what comes to mind for me, and then please, Allison, build on what's emerging for you. I think the flip dynamic is interesting because I see it in two ways. Number one, the amount of uh, AI generated slop that's just like in an exponential stream. So more information generated by AI, speaking to other AIs in a loop of TikToks, it's going to have diminishing returns fast. And so what will become, and that will become commodity that ends up just being more and more and more and more noise.
Mm.
And so what people will be hungry for and what becomes ultimately more valuable is discernment and authenticity and actual relationship. And that's a big one around relationship with, what's coming with companions and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
That said, I do believe that things like discernment and authenticity and really finding a true idea or a true experience will be important. There was a philosopher or writer in late 1800s Britain. His name was William Morris, and it
Mm.
became the William Morris effect. And his idea was, as we were moving to a machine age, things that were crafted by hand, artisans, et cetera, would become more valuable. When things are so industrial and commoditized, the human touch would become more valuable. I think there'll be an AI William Morris effect when the slop just gets so overwhelming and so depleting, back to extraction, but so exhausting and depleting of our minds, our emotions. I do believe that discernment, authenticity, truth, and relationship, although that one's such an interesting dynamic, will matter. And then from a branding perspective, literally this morning, BBMG put out a new piece that our colleague Jess Patera, who's now our head of creative, crafted, which is called The Power of Brand Perspective. And at a moment when so much is just like swirling and there's so much noise, the premise is this question, which is, what's your never change when everything is changing? And I think that that's, as a brand now, I'm not moving into the brand space. What's your never change
Mm-hmm.
when everything is changing? And inside of that, there were five sort of elements of really getting to the clarity of your never change. The first was rooted in human truth, which is, at the end of the day, what is your most fundamental human need that you hope to serve? What is the deepest human reality and fundamental belief that is why you are there as a brand? The second is called edge, which is, what is it that you do differently or distinctly than others? The third is called role, which is, what is your unique contribution inside of an ecosystem? The fourth is boundaries, which is so interesting, which is, what do you say no to? And how do you virtuously um, articulate the lines you will never cross as a brand? And then finally is signal, which is, how do you show up and live in the world in a way that is distinct and recognizable as uniquely you? And so if the question is, what's your never change in a world that's where everything is changing, truth, edge, role, boundary, signal are ways that brands can show up. And that becomes the compass for a brand to live in the world and to understand how AI is used, or their TikTok strategy, et cetera. So what's interesting about this, and I'll share kind of the arc of what I'm thinking about the future of our agency, literally thinking out loud with you, and I'd welcome your thoughts, is that the three things that we're discussing right now is resilience first, which is, how do the human beings navigate the changes that are coming with love and grace and somatic calmness, like being in our bodies as things are changing, so that we go from radical acceptance to symbiotic co-creation. So the humans in the story. The second is the never change, which is the role that brands play in really understanding the power of your perspective. And then the third part of our work is really going to be around narrative and story and meaning making, because so much is changing. We're living into new stories of ourselves and of the world. And it's a combination of making sense and making meaning. And that lives in culture. And so I'm hoping that BBMG, as a next chapter of a brand studio, is really attuned to the emotional, cognitive, relational resilience of the people, that is helping us understand your perspective, which is the compass for everything, the power of brand perspective, and then the story and the signal that allow us to make sense and make meaning in culture. That's what I'm hoping. That's what we will be in service to as a consultant.
Okay, I just want to pause here for a second because
It's so big.
it's so good, and I'm having this moment right now where I'm imagining like a really big corporate company walking into your office, whether this was 10 years ago or last month, and who doesn't generally care about this. They're there for some reason, right? They chose you guys for some reason. So there's got to be a foot in the door with this thinking. But you must have had so many experiences of like an audience who's like giving you a blank stare when you talk about this stuff. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you facilitated that transformation and what you've noticed about people who go from not caring to like completely changing their mindset and working with you guys?
Karuna, that is such an amazing question. I love it. And it's super relevant right now when
Yeah.
there's such a backlash to
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
meaningful or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, like in the wonderful years that we shared with Allison, a lot of like the impulse, not necessarily the language, but the impulse was like, what does it mean to create brands for humans? Like, what is the role of brand broadly in serving our humanity? And that should be great business because you are building distinct value and deep relationships and loyalty and evangelism rooted in solving a truly relevant emotional and practical need. And so, like, that has been the core. Like, how might brand be in service of humanity? And we believe in that. And our ethos was because we were rooted in a niche of sustainability or social impact, but broadly brands for humans, is that we would walk into almost any room and tell the truth as we saw it with love and a spirit of service and generosity to others. And so, of course, we would never work with weapons. We would never work with tobacco, but we would go into like a large food company that had products that were not great. There was a multinational food business that invited us in to help them create a nutrition brochure. And most of their products are very unhealthy snacks,
Wow.
just soda and chips and not good things. So we went in there, and again, it was walk into any room and share the truth as you see it. And I love this story. And so we said, you don't need a nutrition brochure. That's not where you are. What you need is a nourishment strategy. And so we created a whole campaign called Nourish the Next, which is in one generation, our company will nourish the next generation by reimagining our entire way of thinking about health. And it was like it was nutrients per calorie, water positivity, righteous relationships with farmers and regenerative farming. This was in 2013. And we said, it's called Nourish the Next. And it's not a nutrition brochure, it is a nourishment vision. And they looked at us and their jaws dropped and they said it would take an act of God to make any of this happen. And they were like, see you later. Bye. And they showed us the door, like you're fired right on the spot.
Wow.
And it was a pitch. So we just obviously we didn't get it.
Yeah.
However, and so that was like, we were very proud of it. We knew it was the truth. And they were like, there's the door. Nice to meet you. Huh?
Yeah.
3 years later, one of the people in that room called me and had become the head of a very large part of the business. And she said, you know what? When you walked in the room and you told us 3 years ago we didn't need a nourishment brochure, we need a nourish strategy, you were right. And can you come back in and help us get there? And
Yes.
so
They were
it
ready.
is
She was ready.
true that, yeah, sometimes it won't be for everyone, but I do believe that, again, it's back to the compass and what it
Yeah.
means to make a life and make a living and, your power of your perspective. And our perspective is that businesses will thrive when products and services and brands ultimately create more than transactional value.
Yeah.
But I just
That
want to acknowledge something that you presented in that story that I think is extremely important for people to hear, and I am the first person who needs to hear it on a daily basis, which is that you don't know how long it will take for people to understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And you've gotta give them time. There's so many incredible creative minds that I know that just get so frustrated because it's very frustrating what we're all doing,
Yeah.
right? Like that is a huge emotional part of what we're facing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it may take years for people to even understand what you're talking about. And you got to give it that space before you even know or get scared and be quiet, right?
It may take years for yourself to figure it out.
Hmm.
So that's the other piece when you talk about that, Rafe, is, it aligns so much with where I've been moving structure to on the personal level, on the personal creative level of creating this own brand, personal map to do this, to find your own identity and stick with those things and that's the work that I've been doing. And it's taken a long time. And then you get to work on trying to get other people to understand it too.
Well, a layer of this that you're naming is that we didn't go in that room to be righteous. We didn't go in that room to
Mhm.
wave a moral banner. We were there to solve their problem.
Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
to be clear,
Yeah.
we were there because they asked for a reputation play. And we said, no problem. But if you want to actually build your reputation, it's not going to be some shitty brochure. It's going to be a strategy that is authentic and deep and transparent and transformative. That is what builds reputation. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't that we were just like beating our own chest or whatever. We were really there to meet their needs as they
Yeah.
stated. They didn't actually state them, but could have. And
I,
that's where we fell short. But
I
it
want
was to
to
meet their needs.
I want to ask a question on that I know that people in our sphere want to know as well then is when we want to stick to our guns, and a lot of our audience too are going to be independent people, whether they're working for, an independent, brand like a firm like this, or they're working themselves independently and having to jump in and find that work and survive and wanting to have these ideals and sticking to them. And when somebody keeps showing you the door. So, what's your strategy there to remain true and remain solvent and alive,
Yeah.
and surviving?
Well, part of what comes to mind when you ask that, Michelle, is if we only go into the room, and we know it sometimes, when the client dictates the idea, and the idea isn't really the right idea, it's not actually dealing with the best with the brief, but you're just like doing what they said, you'll cash the check. And I think part of and that is depleting. That's very, very diminishing. That's and it happens sometimes. It is what it is. That said, there is something about creative confidence when you go in the room and it's like, I'm about to share an idea that you may not have thought about or even imagined could be useful. But
Mm.
I'm really clear from my experience and the work that we've done and what you've shared as your brief that we have an answer that's really worth thinking about. And sometimes they will kick you out of the room. The other time they'll hire you over and over and over
Yeah.
again. And I think that kind of
Yeah.
creative confidence does matter, which means it also is like a pride of ownership that you're
Yeah.
going in the room authentically, which is this is honestly what I think is a beautiful idea and worth fighting for. And your best clients will be able to grow with it or challenge it and make you even better because
Yeah.
they helped you think about it yet again at another level. But then you're in a real relationship.
Yeah.
That's what a mutual creative relationship looks like.
I totally
Yeah.
agree. And I will chime in, especially once I joined Rafe at BBMG, there was a complete agreement that any pitch that we went into, I would open up the trench coat and have the baseball bat ready to go. And I feel like when I joined, I was like, if we get like 50 hits and 50 losses, to me, that would be complete success. And the fact that Rafe was like, let's everyone just fucking go for it, um, very quickly gave us, it started building up a reputation. And I was so thankful to join a crew that was ready for a little bit of that volatility. And we made some cool fucking shit happen for sure.
Mm. Mm.
I know we're getting close to time, and there's one thing I wanted to bring up that's kind of part of like our developing canon of questions.
And and I have two questions after that. So Karuna,
Okay,
take us.
we're gonna have to go over time. Sorry,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Michelle.
we started a few minutes late because
All
of
right,
me too. So
perfect.
yeah.
So one of the things that we acknowledged when the three of us talked about this, even before episode one, was that to do the things you want to do to create the life you want to create, you have to make choices, and those choices involve sacrifices. And what you decide to give up, just like the boundaries that you say no to, are as important as the things you decide to take on.
Mm.
What are some examples of things you've given up that, you might feel fine about or you might not feel fine about that in the journey that you've been on to creating your life?
Again, such a beautiful question. Um, I think I've tried to be very true um, to the five kind of principles that my dad shared that began the journey. I've tried to act with imperfect knowledge and certainly capacities, but to try to act in each moment with integrity, not knowing the answers, grappling through sometimes, making blunders, but really trying to act with love and integrity. And the number one metric for how I felt I could be a good leader of a studio was that the team felt creative and growing, that their creativity was blossoming and they were growing as a human. And with Brian, making sure that people could get, be whole and pay the bills. Absolutely. But it wasn't win the most awards. It wasn't make the most money. We've had a lot of people knocking on our door to acquire BBMG. And I just did never wanted to be beholden to a 17% profit margin as the number one issue. My first job, as I mentioned, was at an ad agency in Austin, and they now are owned by Omnicom and had a multi-billion-dollar exit. So amen to them. They did it. But I went to my mentor, who I worked with in 1990, and she's still a dear friend. And I said, "What have you learned?" And she said, "I want you to come down and meet the new CEO." And they're like 3 years into an Omnicom acquisition. And the CEO said, "I am a slave to a spreadsheet. I have to fire my most talented people in order to hit a profit margin number." And he said, "If I thought that this is what it would be to be a CEO, I would never have tried to do it here." And so I'm saying that because, yeah, I guess we could have made more money and we could have won more awards and had whatever, more TV spots or whatever. But at the end of the day, that just doesn't fill my cup personally. And everyone's different. There's no judgment to any other path. But working with people I love, doing things that make me feel creative on issues and with brands that I ultimately believe are trying to make a contribution, something bigger than themselves, bigger than a transaction, that is ultimately what a creative life means to me. That is the
Mm.
architecture of a
Mm.
creative life.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, like I honestly, my professor who taught us, not just to make a living, but to make a life, he asked, have a story, a conversation as a practice with your 80-year-old self. Just welcome your 80-year-old self right here and imagine yourself, and they could be, aging or whatever, and you're talking to your 80-year-old self. And John Rodden said, our professor, he said, act in such a way that your 80-year-old self would look back on this moment and the decision you're making and smile.
Mm.
And I just think that has always been with me.
Yeah.
And, again, imperfect, blunder all the time, stumble, fuck up, ask for forgiveness and repair. And at the same time, I do feel, honestly, with a full heart, that this has been a creative life and is continuing as it evolves, and I wouldn't trade any of it, ups and downs and, heartache and triumph. I'm just a big amen.
Yeah. Mm.
Oh my gosh, Rafe. I hope you, I hope I've expressed this to you enough, how extremely grateful I am that our lives came together, and again, the opportunity to be your friend, for you to mentor me, and how much you mean to me and how happy I am to be able to share you with Michelle and Karuna, but I fucking love you to death. You know that, yeah?
Right back at you. Absolutely. And its feeling is entirely mutual. And I'm very grateful that you would even consider me for the conversation today. So thank you.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
so fun.
Thank you. Oh my God, so
And
much.
And to give everyone a little bit of context, I feel like when Rafe and I first started working together, we clearly identified we were a yin and a yang. And I feel like when we come together, it is so, so, so magical. So again, huge appreciation. Michelle, before you kick off everyone, I have 2 questions for Rafe. Is that cool?
If everybody's good with that, I mean, some people might have to run, but we want to start some Q&A as soon as you're done, and we'll do that.
All right, whatever. I want to wrap it up. Rafe, so thank you for being on the Worth Making podcast. And obviously, you are worth making an introduction to Karuna and Michelle. I appreciate everyone who jumped on, but really my priority was I wanted to get you in contact with these 2 incredible women and to keep the relationship and conversation going. So I would ask you, and I hope this becomes like a monthly thing, like who's worth us meeting now that you've gotten to know us? Is there a person or 2? And again, I'll give the preface that I feel like you and I, Rafe, are very, very similar. That if I talk to new people, immediately my brain goes off on,
Yep.
I need to hook you up with this person, that
Yep.
person.
Cool. Well, I'm going to share things on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a double amen on Brian Miller and this the financial health and how to be whole. But I'd like to introduce you to a dear friend who I met a couple years ago, who is a multidisciplinary artist named Suvi, Suuv like Victor I, and she. Gosh, I'll try to say this briefly for time. She was trained as a classical cellist at Juilliard since the time she was 2 years old. She was playing cello. She was from that age trained and designed to be a soloist playing the biggest halls in the world. And she is that talented and has played Carnegie Hall on tour with Hans Zimmer around Europe as a soloist. We created a festival together in Spain 3 years ago. And she will share all of this. But it brought her to the brink of suicide and having to ask herself, what does it mean to architect a creative life? She stepped back from a very successful classical music career and is now a multidisciplinary artist using sound and image and video and photography. If you look up Dark Therapy by Suvi, you will see her multimedia project. I just saw it at National Stardust here in Williamsburg.
I feel like I've heard of this.
It is mind blowing, and she worked with neuropsychologists. She worked with sound therapy. It is both kind of like immersive therapy and deprivation therapy, video, and it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. And I invite you to check in, and I'll connect you with Suvi. Her name is Sophia Bacelar, and she realized that her actual name limited who she truly was. She had to change everything to become the artist that she truly was. That
It's
is
backwards, but yeah, it's
it.
already cool. Yeah. Oh my God.
And you will learn all about Suvi, and that is what a creative life looks like. That is the architecture, courage, and the creativity of making a life in this way. And I just invite you to welcome her in, because not only is her story so powerful, her creativity so inspiring. I think they're deep lessons about what does it mean to act with honesty and bravery and humanity through the life we're in. And I can't think of anyone who has done more to own her own creativity with such honesty and beauty. And it's opened so many doors, so many partnerships, collaborations, sponsorships, doors, just because she had that moment to say, I'm going to be who I am, and I'm not going to just react or conform to anyone else's expectations. It's the deepest, like, creative expression that I know of. And I'll
Beautiful.
connect you, by the way. It's suvi.xyz. It's your site.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
The number one, having time with you, so valuable. And then again, after our conversation, for you to be in the moment and be like, this person is the next person that you need to speak to. I find, again, the entire reason that we're even doing this is to be a little hive that pollinates
Yep.
and connects
I wonder
good
what's happening to
people.
Suvi right now. There's like her ears are tingling. There's something going on. She's going to tell
I
us.
hope so. And I will, before I know Michelle's trying to
No,
jump in.
I want to give the audience a chance to do questions too.
Well, and the one last thing, and we can go, this is not a question. This is me, Rafe, you brought up like begging for forgiveness is easier than asking for permission. So I'm going to say it right now. Would you be willing for us to give you a free hall pass to join us every month for free?
I am here in service, and the questions you're asking and the community you're building, like Structure Society, which I really, really love, is like, yeah, that's what it means. Being in a creative life is alongside others and in community. So, like, whatever, whether that's whatever the cadence, whatever the content, whatever the context, just let me know.
All
Vice
right,
versa, vice versa.
I'm giving you my +1 going forward, and I hope the Structure platform and Resilience Collaborative
Yeah.
Yeah,
can
they're
find.
very aligned.
They are
Absolutely.
very
Yes,
aligned. I've
they're.
combed the website and they really are. I'm already learning a ton from you. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
Rafe, thank you.
So much, so
Thank
much.
you all.
Thank you so much for being here.